All right. What is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, Coach JK McLeod. We're kicking off episode number 269 of Help Me Understand. Today is going to be quick, short-ish. We'll kind of see how things shake out. Q&A focused on fitness and nutrition topics. About three, let's see, we've got one, two, three, four. Yeah, four questions that kind of popped onto my newsfeed / inbox, kind of a combo of the two. So before getting into those, I, as always, want to say thank you for choosing to press play on the Help Me Understand podcast. I know that you have no shortage of podcast content that you can consume, and you probably do consume. So I truly just really never take it for granted that you chose to press play on Help Me Understand. Whether you are here for the fitness and nutrition talk or the other topics outside of that, self-development, growth, random things, I just appreciate you for being here. So thank you so much. And let's go ahead and get into these particular topics. So let's see. Question number one. What is an app that you would recommend for tracking calories / carbs / protein? So I, for reference, have used a handful of different apps over the years. When I first really started tracking macros, which would have been back in 2012 / 13, I think like most people, I started off with MyFitnessPal. So I've had experience with MyFitnessPal. I've had experience with either Chronometer or Chronometer. I truly don't remember the proper way to pronounce that. MyFitnessPal I used for a few years. Chronometer or Chronometer I used for a full year with a coach, and then I believe I used it for, let's say, about 6-ish months on my own. So let's say about a year and a half of experience using that. I have also used Carbon Diet, I believe is the name of it, Lane Norton's app. Use that for just a handful of months. And then currently I use Macro Factor, and I've used Macro Factor for all of 2025. I used Macro Factor, and then had actually used it previous to that for probably about a year or so. And that's what I'm currently using now. So I share all that just to kind of give you some context that I'm answering this question not only from just my perspective as a coach who interacts with other people who've used a bunch of other apps. I know folks who have used, let's see, the RP Diet piece or app. I know folks who have used, I think it was called Macros First. There's a bunch of different ones that are out there, but the only ones that I have personal experience with are the ones that I have named. I'd say MyFitnessPal is probably the most popular one out of all of them. For myself, I would actually say Macro Factor, and that's not specifically only because I'm using it myself. However, that definitely does play into it, and there's a reason that I use that particular one. One, when it comes to actually ease of logging things, which is typically going to come down to when you scan a barcode for the folks who are using barcoded foods, then how easy is it for that app to recognize that barcode versus how many times or how often you have to end up manually entering the information yourself. And one side note that I will mention is regardless of whether the app that you're using has a barcode scanner or not, you should always be double checking that whatever you scan on the barcode is the actual item that you scanned. I have seen some really wild stuff, just even myself, and this is not just with Macro Factor or with MyFitnessPal. I've come across this with multiple apps where you'll scan something like oatmeal and it'll come up like Lay's potato chips. There's always some random things that are kind of out there, or you may scan something and it doesn't necessarily default to one serving size. It defaults to like 57 serving sizes. There's some wild stuff that's out there. It doesn't happen that often. However, do pay attention regardless of what app you use. So back to the question, as far as the app that I would recommend, my unpaid, sponsored, unsolicited endorsement would be for Macro Factor, which from a cost perspective, I think it's like 10 to 11, maybe 12. Let's say like 11 to $12 a month, or I think you can get the year for like $70 or something like that. Um, I recommend that one because from my experience, pretty much does the same stuff that MyFitnessPal does as far as being able to easily scan and enter things, easily can create your own meals, all of that stuff. I haven't used MyFitnessPal in quite a while, so I don't know um, like firsthand if there are certain things that have been added. Macro Factor also has like an AI feature where you can take a picture of the meal or whatever you're about to eat and then also type in text to add a bit of a description, and it'll give you its best guesstimate on what the macros may be for that particular meal. The disclaimer, I guess, that I'll put in here is that uh, if you're using food labels, those which I believe I've covered in previous episodes, and most nutrition focused coaches will tell you, and dietitians will tell you and remind you that food labels, I believe, still are allowed to be anywhere upwards of 20% wrong in whatever calorie estimation they're making. So it can be 20% higher or 20% lower. So for example, you may think that you're ingesting, like, let's say 100 calories, and it could be anywhere from 80 to 120. So by no means do I ever think that anybody should be super tied to the exactness of the number that they're getting in a macro tracking app. So I just mentioned that with the whole AI thing. The thing that sets Macro Factor apart for me is the ability to enter in what your goals are, enter in your stats as far as your weight, and you can do like a visual body fat estimate, basically, where you're just estimating like, hey, here's where I kind of think I am, as like a little chart. And then you can put in what your goal is. So for example, I have put in that my goal is to be at a certain like weight by the end of February. And then it will have you select basically you can toggle like a sliding scale to basically select your estimated or your desired rate of weight loss, let's say. Or you can also do this with weight gain. It lets you select a lot of different programs. So that's another plus that it's got too. However, what I really like is that it has a feature where you can, as you're sliding your thumb, or, if you are weird, I'm going to say weird, and you decide to use your pinky to slide it, whatever, as you're sliding the scale or the line, it will let you know if it feels like your goal is going to be like super aggressive, or if it's a slower rate, like that sort of a thing. Not slower in terms of it being bad. However, saying like slow as in like that's very realistic, or that's really, really aggressive. You might want to watch out for that. Like if you're trying to put in that you want to lose 3 pounds a week over the next 4 weeks, like it'll let you know how aggressive that is. It also lets you pick between, I want to say, 3 different ways that you can reach your goal. You can do self-coached, where you manually will change your macros if you want to, when you want to. You can do coached, where you can check in with the app every week, provided that you've logged information that's on there. And it has a whole bunch of resources that let you know how it basically calculates where it believes that your daily energy expenditure is and all that sort of stuff. And it will spit that out for you. So you can do coached, where you check in each week, which is basically just, it uses an algorithm to analyze the numbers that you've given, and then we'll give you an estimate of, okay, here's what we're going to adjust for this week, and you can accept that or decline it. Or you can do what's called collaborative, I think is the other feature, where you can check in and it'll give you hey, we think that you should overall like increase or decrease your calories by, for example, 100 calories. And then it lets you kind of select, okay, where do you want that to come from? For myself, transparently, what I do is I use the coached option, and let it just kind of tell me, hey, here's where we think you should be. And then if I want to make some adjustments, I will. However, right now, especially at this point in the year with things that I've got going on, I want to do as little thinking as possible when it comes to my own fitness and nutrition right now. So I would say for me, I would say Macro Factor. I also believe that the folks that run that particular company have been so ridiculously transparent about how they come up with the information that they do. There's a plethora, it's a great word for today, a plethora of articles and resources that they will give you access to help you understand why the algorithm is giving you the information that it is. So yeah, that would be my recommendation, would be macro factor. Sometimes when people ask me that question, I tell them macro factor and they're like, oh yeah, but you have to pay for that. And I get my fitness pal for free. I'm like, that's completely fine. It's just, you asked me for a recommendation, and my recommendation isn't based on, whether or not you want to pay, $10 a month for something that you're saying is important for your goals. At the end of the day, I think that the hands down the most effective thing to do is to, if you're going to track things, to also work with a coach who will walk alongside that journey with you. So don't get it twisted. This is not me saying that coaching, that apps replace coaching or anything along those lines. I do also understand, though, that there truly are folks that are in situations where they either are not comfortable, and don't want to get out of their comfort zone to work with a coach, or possibly it's just not something that's financially feasible. I can totally understand that, and a myriad of other reasons. So that answers that question, hopefully. All right. Next question. How many days per week should I be working out to lose weight? Okay. So just overall with this, when it comes to how many days per week you should be working out to lose weight, and in previous episodes, I've talked about how Q&As can be, I've decided that they can be a struggle for me sometimes, because I love me some context. Like, I love a lot of context. So when you do like Q&A stuff and stuff is sent to you, you don't necessarily, well, you may or may not have the opportunity to really dig in. And this is a challenge that I'm taking on in 2026, being able to try and answer questions without a whole lot of context. The challenge for me is I've created this story where I believe that my words have power and my opinion has some weight behind it. No pun intended. So I don't, I think that when I give advice and give an opinion, like, I take that pretty seriously, and maybe sometimes I'm taking it too seriously. So I could just answer the question and keep it simple. All right. So how many days per week should I be working out to lose weight? Okay. So generally what I would say is, instead of looking at it as how many days per week should you be working out to lose weight, what I would look at is, how many sets per week per muscle group should you be doing, in order to build and or maintain muscle. Because whether you are trying to lose weight or gain weight or anywhere in between, or maintain your weight, you want to, generally, I would assume that most folks don't want to lose muscle. So a general range, whether you're beginner or intermediate, I would say would be somewhere between 10 to 15 sets per week per major muscle groups. So major muscle groups being things like your quads, your glutes, your chest, your shoulders, your back. So basically right around there. I'd say for my female clients, it's pretty much quads, glutes, shoulders, and back. We're not doing like a ton of chest movements. We'll do some horizontal pressing, but we won't do like 4 different variations of bench press. Like, I don't necessarily have female clients that are looking to build like juicy pecs. They're more looking to build like juicy glutes and delts for the most part. And then my male clientele, yeah, they're definitely all about the pecs. So I say all that just to say, if we were looking at how many days per week, I would start with 2 days per week. Overall, again, I would recommend 2 days per week, a total of 10 to 15 sets per muscle group within that week. So ideally kind of splitting them between the 2 workouts. So 5 in one one workout, 5 in the other one, or 7 and 8, somewhere along those particular lines, like training those muscle groups twice per week. I would frame it more along those lines, how many days a week or sets per week you should be doing to build and maintain muscle, versus how many days per week you should be working out to lose weight, because the primary driver of weight loss is going to actually be your nutrition. Like that is going to be the primary driver, because trying to focus on, let's say, like if I work out, let's say 3 to 4 days a week, then I burn more calories. That's going to be, it is essentially the dog chasing its tail. And it's almost like the dog chasing its tail when the dog is also blind and can't totally see where its tail is, but it knows it's somewhere back there, because trying to estimate how many calories you're burning is the the definition of a losing battle, because it's completely inaccurate to try to figure out how many calories you're burning and all that other stuff. So when you are chasing or trying to stay in a caloric deficit, which is the driver of weight loss and fat loss, if you are working on staying in a caloric deficit, you primarily are going to control that through what you eat, not how many calories you burn in the workout. So overall, again, where I would start is strength train. So lift weights, some sort of resistance training, 2 days per week. Get in 10 to 15 sets per week across the week. Okay. So not in one, doesn't have to be all in one sitting. 10 to 15 sets per week per muscle group, and focus on your 4 to 5 major muscle groups, being your quads, your glutes, your shoulders, your chest, and your back. If you do need help with putting together a very straightforward workout to follow, just hit me up at Coach JK McLeod, or email me jk@jkmcleod.com, and I have a total body workout guide. We also have that available. And if you're listening to this and you're in the Fitness Foundations community, we have that guide available for free inside of the community I want to say it's in the resources tab. And it's just a very short guide that walks you through how to put together your own total body workout program that you can follow for forever. So hope that helps there. All right. Let's see. Third question. I did 75 hard successfully, but seem to struggle when I'm not on the program. How can I find consistency outside of the program? Okay. It is January 2026 at the time of this recording. So January, just from the way things fall within my universe, this tends to be a very popular time to do 75 hard. I can't remember what episode number it is. However, if you do scroll back within the past, I want to say this episode was posted within the past year or so, I did a pretty big deep dive into if I were to do 75 hard again, because I've done the program before and completed the program, I should say, before. Here's how I would approach it. So my answer to this question with, I've done it successfully, but seem to struggle when I'm not on the program. How can I find consistency outside of the program? My answer to this would definitely be found within there. And the summary of it would be, as you are doing the 75 hard program itself, work on creating your, after this program is over, what I'm going to do plan. So if you're listening to this and you're somebody who is well-versed in 75 hard and just the overall live hard program, I completely acknowledge that, yes, you can do 75 hard and then you can go into the complete live hard program, which is a 1 calendar year where you can complete the different phases after 75 hard. You could certainly do 75 hard again. However, this individual, I think, is asking a really good question where they're like, hey, without that structure and that defined restriction and that chasing perfection, I just find that I just seem to really struggle. And I would be asking some additional questions, like when you say struggle, help me understand what you mean when you say struggle, because that would be one of the main questions. Is when you're saying that you're struggling, what do you do outside of the program? Because I have received this same question multiple times in multiple different forms. And I'd say that they really fall into two different camps. Someone is defining struggle as they go from 100 to 0. So instead of working out the 2 times per day, like doing 2 45-minute workouts, they have slowly drifted into doing maybe 2 workouts for the entire week. Now, don't get it twisted. This is unrelated to me saying work out 2 times per week is fine in the previous question. These are all separate questions, so miss me with all that. All right. So they went from working out 2 days a week religiously for 75 days, or however many days it took them to complete the program, to now working out 2 times in a week, or maybe even less. They went from drinking a gallon of water to maybe they'll get 30 ounces of water in a day. They went from reading 10 pages per day to now they're not reading at all. You get the idea. So that's camp one. And then there's camp number two, where someone will say, I seem to struggle. And what they're talking about is more often than not, they are pretty consistent by, everyday standards. However, by doing the 75 hard program, they've basically created this vision of consistency being the perfection that they were basically achieving when they were on the program itself. And that's something that can be really, really difficult. So instead of training 2 times per day over 7 days, they're training 5 days per week. Instead of when they go for a walk, instead of walking for 45 minutes outdoors, they're now going for 20-minute walks. So it becomes this dilemma that they've essentially created, where the standards that were part of the 75 hard program, they've looked at that now as being the picture of consistency versus that being something that's a step above consistency, if that makes any sense. Like they've basically taken perfection and that's become the new consistency standard, and they're identifying that as the struggle. So I think I can't move on without making sure that I do point out that we need to come to an understanding, like help me understand when you say struggle, what you mean when you say you struggle. So, as I said, as you're doing the program, look into or create, so keep a journal, keep notes, something like that around, okay, after this program is over, here's what I'm going to do. And an idea that I would actually recommend is create a 75 days after 75 hard program for yourself. So after you've completed the 75 days, whatever that date is going to be, then type into Google or ChatGPT or whoever you talk to and say that your ending date is going to be January, or let's say it's going to be March 1st, 2026. Then say, what is 75 days after March 1st, 2026? And then that gives you a particular date. And then I would set a particular goal for your next milestone, what you want to work towards by that next date. Because if the 75-day thing is helpful for you because structure is helpful, then first set something like that. Then as you're putting together a plan for, okay, after the program is over, what am I going to do for the next 75 days after that? As opposed to what am I going to do for the next year after that? What am I going to do for the next 75 days after that? Potentially, you can answer that by asking yourself these questions. What systems am I currently putting in place to get these critical tasks, as I believe they're still referred to in 75 hard, done? So for example, in order for me to maintain this particular style of eating, what are certain things that I've put in place? Well, what I've done is I have pretty much consistently meal prepped on Sundays and Thursdays. I have consistently made sure that we go to the grocery store, and so we're always well stocked with fruits and vegetables and Greek yogurt and whatever, things that are very easy to grab. I've put these systems in place to help me stay consistent during these 75 days, or help me adhere to this program for 75 days. I changed, how I was driving to work. This is one that I heard from someone where they said, I used to always drive by this particular fast food restaurant on my way home from work. And what I realized is I was being tempted every time that I was driving home from work after a tough day to just go through the drive-through instead of eating the meal that I had prepared at home, or something along those lines. So they changed the way, very simple change. They just took a turn one other direction instead of that direction. It was about the same amount of time apparently. And what that did is it removed that visual temptation, I guess, to just, do a little swerve over to that drive-through. So thinking about what systems have you put in place in order to get your tasks done, in order to get the 10 pages of reading done. What were you doing in order to make that happen? You were getting up on time, not hitting the snooze button. Is that something you can continue to do? Okay, so put that system in place for the next 75 days. The other thing that I would have you ask yourself is, what sacrifices are you making to your relationships, your work, etc., in order to complete the program over that 75-day period? I asked that one specifically because 75 hard is a time commitment. It just is straight up. And for myself and just about anyone that I've been able to have like a real conversation with about completing the program itself, I would say overwhelmingly, I was going to say 100%. I'll conservatively say 8 times out of 10, we have always agreed that something that we really took away from doing that program was the realization of how important time management was, and really transparently for myself, how much time I was wasting doing like not really anything productive. Like how much time I was wasting just kind of just scrolling on my phone or opening my email for the 73rd time for no apparent reason, or, something along those lines. I'm not saying every minute has to be filled with something. However, when you have a list of tasks that you need to complete based on being committed to completing this particular program, you don't have, for most folks who are working, have a family, or anywhere in between there, you don't have a whole lot of time to like piss away, because drinking water takes time. Doing two 45-minute workouts, especially having them spaced 2 to 3 hours apart, that takes time. Prepping food so that you can stay consistent, or really, quote, honestly, perfect to the diet that you pick, that takes time. So those different things, like those helped me really get a better appreciation for the amount of time I really did have available to me. So in that time, though, there are sacrifices that are going to be made. So if it's been one of those days where it was just like back to back, wall to wall, front to back, and side to side, ceiling to floor, and you get home and you still have a 45-minute workout to do, and your kid is like, "Hey, don't you want to just chill on the couch with me and watch this game?" And you haven't seen them all day. And you're making a choice at that point. Like, am I going to sit here and watch the game and just kind of like chill? Or am I going to go out on this 45-minute walk when it's a little chilly outside and I don't really feel like doing that? Like, that's a sacrifice that you're choosing to make. And while that may be a sacrifice that you're okay making while you're on the program, are you willing to make that sacrifice outside of the program? Or what is an adjusted version of that particular sacrifice that you're willing to make? So those are the things that I would really think about as far as how you can find consistency outside of the program itself. Is while you're going through the program itself, be prepared, like start working on your plan for the next 75 days after that. And I cannot stress it enough, going back to the original point before moving on to the last question, I cannot stress enough that I think it's very, very easy for, once you've spent 75 or more days, especially if you're somebody who failed it and needed to start over multiple times, how easy it is for that to really just change the filter of what you believe consistency is. I'm a strong believer that as much as I think it can be a good challenge for particular people, and who are like 75 hard diehards are going to hate that I said the word challenge. I'm not calling it a challenge. I think it can be a good challenge, like a challenging thing for someone to do. There are some folks that just have difficulty understanding or agreeing with my perspective that doing those particular, I think it's 5 tasks every day without fail is not consistency, it's perfection. And that's okay. You're signing up for going after perfection. So that's that. All right. Last question here. This one was nutrition focused. What are your thoughts on cutting carbs for a while to help with weight loss? Not forever, just to get things jump started. Okay. This is a really easy one for me because outside of fitness coaching, I work still full time in the retail world. And many of the folks that I work with are in some varying stage of wanting to refocus, re-engage, or just kind of get started on taking care of themselves a bit better. They are usually in the range of like their mid-ish 20s, like for the most part. Like I'd say about 23-ish tends to kind of be the sweet spot, maybe even a little bit younger sometimes. And they've begun to have that realization, like they're far past, or not far past, but they're a few years removed from high school, and some of them are graduating college, some of them are in college, some of them have been out already, and they're in their first, like, let's call it professional job, and then they're still working this retail job just to kind of fill in some of the supplemental income and all that stuff. And so they're starting to realize the importance of taking care of themselves a bit more, because maybe they even are having to take care of their own insurance bills and things like that finally. So I will get some form of this question or comment very often with like, yeah, I'm just going to be cutting carbs. I know, I'm not going to do it forever, just a little bit, just to get things jump started. So a place that I will start is first, like, help me understand what you mean when you say cutting carbs, because, I don't necessarily think it's a great idea. I'll tell you transparently, to cut your fruits and vegetables. And they'll kind of give me the like screw face look. And I basically am asking that question sarcastically, because when they're talking about cutting carbs, and I'm assuming that this may be the case too, when someone says and asks me, what do you think about me just cutting carbs for a while? What they're typically referring to most likely are going to be things like cookies and chips and ice cream and cake and things like that. In some cases, they may also be talking about things like bread and pasta and potatoes, and maybe they're throwing like French fries in there. I don't know, but they're essentially talking about, let's call them like traditionally what we would call like junk food. And they're saying like, yeah, I'm going to cut things like that out. So the first thing that I would do is remind you that carbohydrates also include things like fruits and vegetables. So those are also carbohydrates. And then typically the retort would be something along the lines of, well, you know what I mean, like the bad carbs. Okay, gotcha. So without getting into an argument over bad and good and all those things, if you are looking to try to get a better control on your caloric intake by controlling the amount of calories that you intake, then yeah, that could be a decent place to start, is taking a look at things like cookies, chips, ice cream, cake, and things like that, and bringing that to a smaller portion of what you consume in a day, while increasing the portion of things like fruits and vegetables, uh, healthy fats, things like that. The crazy, or not crazy, but the funny thing is, in a lot of these conversations, there's not a really good realization that a decent amount of these things that folks are talking about when they say cutting carbs, and they're talking like chips and cookies and ice cream and things like that, those many of those foods tend to be higher in caloric content from fat than it does from carbs. And while I understand where they're coming from, I remember doing this with somebody before, and we took the example, I think, of like a whole Jack's pizza. Um, because we were talking about like, okay, well, when you say cutting carbs, like, what's something that you eat pretty regularly that you believe maybe you need to bring down a little bit as far as like cutting carbs? And the example they used was this Jack's pizza. And I was like, bro, you're speaking my language, because I could smash a Jack's pizza, no problem. Like that's the whole family size thing. Not even, especially the thin crust. So we literally sat down with like a napkin or a paper towel, and we pulled up the nutrition facts for a particular Jack's pizza, and dude's mind was blown to look and see, oh, okay, so the majority of the calories for this particular Jack's pizza are actually coming from fats, not from carbs. I'm like, yeah, I'm not saying that you should still go smash like one and a half of these. I'm like, could you bring it down to just half of one, and then actually, grab some veggies to eat with the pizza? Like, I'm big on changing up your nutrition pairing. So burger and fries can become burger and broccoli. Chicken tenders and fries. So fries are kind of getting the shaft here, but chicken tenders and fries can become chicken tenders with a side of veggies. Things like that. I'm big on things like that, just because, quite honestly, I like burgers and I like chicken tenders, and I do enjoy pizza. So I'm big on like just changing up the combinations. However, like, back to the purpose of this particular question, I am all good with folks getting an understanding that, yeah, in order to get things moving with weight loss and or fat loss, that's maybe a different podcast episode to make sure that we're clear on what we're talking about with those two things. Um, but overall, yeah, it is going to be necessary to reduce the amount of food that you're consuming, or increase the amount of energy that you're expending. And ideally, we can do a little bit of a combination of the two. However, the majority of that is going to be, as I mentioned at the jump, spurred by your nutrition, your focus there. So before going all in on I'm cutting carbs and thinking that that means just like cookies, chips, ice cream, and cake, also understand that when you make statements like that, then eliminating carbohydrates would also mean that you are no longer eating fruits and vegetables. And that would have you missing out on a significant portion of micronutrients, so different vitamins and minerals that you ideally need in order to function as a human. Like that would be helpful. So what I would say is, as you are working to bring possibly like bring down the amount of like the cupcakes and all that stuff that you're consuming, work on bringing up the amount of fruits and vegetables that you are consuming. All right. So hopefully that's helpful. All right. All right. That is the questions that I have for today. If you have particular topics, questions, anything like that, they can be fitness and nutrition related or not. And I'll take any consideration or any suggestions that you have. Please do not hesitate to throw them my way. You can hit me up on Instagram at Coach JK McLeod. You can email me jk@jkmcleod.com. That's MCLEOD. The JK you should be able to spell, hopefully. So thank you again for listening to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. Truly appreciate it. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time.